Absolutely.
That's the big trade that happened. We also had a firing over the weekend. Mike Malone calls it no class, no balls. Mike Brown fired on Friday. They were 13-18 at the time, in the midst of a 5-game losing streak. All 5 of those losses came at home. He was also the coach of the year in 22-23. P.S. You never want that award, period. He had just signed a 3-year contract extension back in June. Doug Christie takes over the coaching spot there. Lou, what do you know about Mike Brown's firing that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, first by all accounts, and especially like the outpouring of the support Coach Mike Brown has received from all of the coaches around the league. It had nothing to do with who he is as a man. Professionally, one of the more decorated and respected coaches, in association in probably the last 15 years with what he's been able to accomplish as an assistant in Golden State, what he's done as a head coach in Cleveland and all of those things. He's a champion as an assistant coach on 4 different occasions, multiple Coach of the Year awards recently, as recently as 2022, but from what I understand, it just ran its course very fast and surprisingly. This was a team who we all had and still have high hopes for, and they fell short of those expectations under his leadership. And that happens, and that's no slight to his pedigree as a coach. Players get traded for a lack of a fit. Coaches aren't immune to that. So I'm hearing there was just some pushback from how De'Aaron Fox was continuously being singled out, whether it was publicly or behind the scenes, or the players just didn't agree with that sentiment, or I was even hearing whispers that there was a situation where he might have asked, or suggested that even DeMar DeRozan come off the bench, and those things proved to be severe missteps in an already challenging season, where it put the front office in a position where they had to side with either the all-star talent they had or to part ways with their former Coach of the Year, who had a brand new 3-year extension. And ultimately, they chose to go with the players. And that made Mike Brown a casualty of that. Could they have handled it differently the way that he was fired? That's not my call to make. A lot of coaches and a lot of different people are coming out in support of how it was handled. But this was just a classic example of, a coach losing the locker room and not being on the same page with his players. And, at the end of the day, the players were, who management chose to side with.
Yeah, and I think it's more how it happened, right? The stories coming out, how they let him go through practice, they let him do media on the way to the plane, and they give him a call. So I think that just out of respect is not the way you do that, especially with a guy of a pedigree, of a resume like Mike Brown. I think that, first of all, is where kind of that hurts, right? Coaches come and go, and every coach knows, look, as many good points as Malone made and Rick Carlisle made and all these coaches, this is the nature of the business. And there is a death sentence as an NBA coach where this is bound to happen. Like this happens to everybody, unless you're a pop, and even then, like Steve Kerr, they might let him resign before they fire him one day. But at the end of the day, they're going to move on at some point. So it's tough. It's a horrible situation because he's dealing with the roster that they put together at the end of the day. So obviously he can make adjustments. He can make certain, offensive sets and play calls and substitution pattern. And as a head coach, you are in charge of all that stuff. But Mike Brown's kind of proven a lot, and he has turned this franchise around. Let's not forget just how quickly they were lighting the beam. There was excitement in Sacramento. So I hope they don't go away from that, because they are on to something here. They do have the talent in that locker room to win games. And I think obviously when there's struggles and you're in, the first to go is usually the coach, right? You maybe look to trade a player or two, but the first to go is the scapegoat is usually the coach. It's weird, the timing now after just signing a 3-year extension, which also they missed the playoffs and they gave him a 3-year extension, doubling his salary. So that to me was an interesting move in the first place when obviously there was some progress there and some development, but it definitely came as a shock. And I think just how they handled it with letting him kind of go through that with the media the night before, the calling out of De'Aaron Fox, not fouling the 3-point shooter. That was weird, probably not smart, but at the end of the day, that was also a bonehead play by De'Aaron Fox, and he knows that. But you never want to say that about your best player. So yeah. I heard there's some personality things too. So it's interesting. I probably wouldn't have fired him quite yet. I think that's a little premature. But there's definitely some personality traits I heard about him that just don't sit well in that locker room also.
And Chandler, and you know what else, bro? the De'Aaron Fox thing when he's calling him out on a 3-pointer, that was the first time that we saw it. You know what I mean? But if you behind the scenes, if you're constantly doing this, messing with your all-star player, and you guys just don't stick, it's only going to be a matter of time before management decides to make a move. And that looked like that's what the case was here. Like that wasn't the first time, but they made sure it was going to be the last time that he criticized De'Aaron Fox in the public.
And you know this,
can
you know how many coaches I had that were so cool when they were assistant coaches, and then you get a head coaching job and things change, right? You become the man, you're in charge, your relationship. So I can see personality-wise how that has kind of shifted a little bit with Mike Brown. He's a legendary assistant coach. He's had some great head coaching gigs, but the dynamic changes. So I don't see that from the outside. Obviously, I'm not in Sacramento every day, but there were apparently some confidence-shattering conversations behind the scenes that didn't sit well with these players. And at the end of the day, it's a players' league, and this is a prime example of that.
Absolutely.
So my question is, because we all know the De'Aaron Fox situation, didn't sign that big deal. There's both financial reasons and probably little leverage reasons just to see, are you guys going to build around? Are we doing anything here? Do you think that this is a step in the direction of keeping him, or do you think that that is already broken, Lou?
Yeah, my opinion is this looks like a step of trying to keep him. You bring in Doug Christie, who was already there, and from what I understand, Doug Christie was a hiring from front office. He wasn't a Mike Brown guy to begin with, so that's somewhat of a fresh start for De'Aaron Fox. If you're trying to re-sign him, you've already shown your hand. You've shown him that, we're committed to putting guys around you in the signing of DeMar DeRozan. We're committed to trying to build this thing in the right direction. Now, granted, they haven't gotten off to the start that they would like to. They're in a 5-6 game losing streak. They got to play better basketball. That's fair to say. We won't put all of this on Mike Brown. They got to play better basketball, but this definitely looks like a step in the right direction to keep De'Aaron Fox happy, to keep him around, and they build from there.
Yeah, they better re-sign him because he is a franchise type player. He's a stud. So if this does seem like, obviously it's so fresh with the last play of the game there and the kind of the videos of them talking, it definitely feels like there was some animosity there, and that's part of the reason why. So I do think this is a step in the right direction of kind of locking him in. And look, you have Fox, you have Sabonis. You made the move for DeMar DeRozan, who I'm a huge fan of DeMar DeRozan. Basketball fit-wise on this team, I didn't really think it was ever the best fit, but you have those three type of talents, you're in a great situation where you can add around that. You can add some shooting. I still think they need to go and get like a Cam Johnson. They need to go and try and get a Kuzma. They need to go try and go like a stretch four like that can really open the floor for those guys and let them work, let them operate. But they have the talent. I love Herter. I love Murray. Like they have the pieces on that team. They just have to find the right leader, which clearly didn't think was Mike Brown. And I think they're going to be fine. But I don't want this buzz for the Kings to go away. He was on fire. Like I said, last year I was so lighting the beam, breaking the streak of the playoffs. Like there's a buzz there. Don't let that go away just because of this firing.
I mean, we were just lighting the beam like 20 minutes ago. What the hell happened here? It's just broken. It completely broke. The Doug Christie situation's weird. What?
It's a fickle league, let me tell you.
God, it really is. Like, all right. I think, Chandler, you're right. I think there's something to be said for how they did it. Just the idea that you're driving to the plane and you get a phone call. It's not the best look for anybody involved.
You make a bad misstep 20 minutes before that, that's when you go get fired. It is what
it's like that's what, if I could speak to you for a second before you board this plane, that'd be great. Guys, we also had, it's not a full moon. I double checked.